Optimistic than me, at least.
Our guest, Macharia Njeru, is here, and he's also smiling as he listens. You know, he chaired IPOA. He actually helped establish IPOA, right?
That's
Macharia?
right.
And what we are saying, is it really so far-fetched that we expect that this is what the bosses of our security system would be discussing?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I can tell you for a fact that the way the system is created, a lot of times it's actually created to fail. I always say that don't hate the player, just hate the game. Because if the game is structured in a manner that makes it practically difficult for people to operate in the right environment, it becomes very difficult. And I can tell you, Eric, Janet, and Mariam, that the police particularly, they are so much interfered with by the politicians that it's practically impossible for them to operate in a professional manner. Because whereas the post-2010 constitution was enacted, it was promulgated in a manner that would have an independent police service, the politicians have refused to make it independent because they want to misuse it, which is why you'll find that there hasn't been that much change. In fact, sometimes, you know, you'll be tempted to say that things are getting worse because they want to use them as an instrument of force that they can perpetuate all the illegalities, that can protect them, that they can use to harass their opponents. And so even when the minister goes there, for me, it's just the photo ops. And after that, you know, it's
just ticking a box.
I feel validated.
You feel validated.
Yeah.
I feel so validated. Even the thing
sana.
about the system being like
set up to fail.
They're set up to fail.
We say that even about IBC.
The
The
game
first
is
thing I
rigged.
said is that a lot of these are set up to fail. He's just clarified that it's just so much interference. And I know one of the questions we'll get into is, okay, how do we achieve that independence? Because both bodies always have the word independent, but they're anything
There's
but.
nothing independent
And
about
then
them.
it compromises an entire country's operation. So.
Yeah. But Macharia, get the quote. This girl is called Janoma Quotes. Okay? She gives us quotable quotes from people who, you know, have said things. Maybe a future quote will actually be, who said that? Macharia Njeru on NTV one morning.
Yeah.
Today?
We're starting that compilation, by the way. Even you guys won't escape it. But today, the person who said this is, you know, she's a formidable person in the space of climate and activism, and was essentially, in my words, the original climate activist. So that should give you a hint, Kenyan. But this almost isn't in relation to what she always talks about. This quote says, "Without good governance, there can be no peace." Who said that?
Is it Wangari Maathai?
It is. Yeah. She did. I wanted to pick that because while she's spoken so much and so extensively about climate issues, she also spoke extensively about governance, about peace, about interference by politicians. And I was saying to Mariam and Eric earlier, a lot of what she said in that interview back in 1992 holds true in a way that is so eerie. There's a lot of references that she made to interference of politicians and, you know, in progress with regards to the environment, with regards to policies. Many, many, many years later, here we are.
Yeah, okay. I do admire, Wangari Maathai actually is my hero, I must say that. My heroes are women. Wangari Maathai is one, of course the other one is my mother. So, and it is true. If we don't sort out political governance, because I have been in private sector institutions, I have been in public sector institutions. And the biggest difficulty I've seen, having served as the first chair of IPOA and also having served as the vice chair of the Judicial Service Commission, is that the political side of it, the governance, it is so messed up that if we don't sort it out, we'll always keep having these problems time again and again. And why do I say that? Let me take an example of Independent Police Oversight Authority. We set up that institution and you know, we ensured that things were working. In fact, during my time, things like abductions were almost unheard of. And when it came to taking action against police, they knew that we're independent enough to take action against them if they're culpable, or exonerate them if they were not. And many a times, the government, the president then, and even the deputy president who is now the president, they were very unhappy with us. It was in public domain, you know, were always, castigating us. They even tried to take away our independence by bringing a bill in Parliament, because particularly after we challenged the recruitment of police officers, which was done very badly, very corruptly. And they said that we were hard-headed and they wanted to remove us from office. But we stood firm. In fact, Duale, who is coming here, brought in a bill in Parliament, which, because of pressure, they withdrew it. But now, the thing is this: when our term came to an end, they were very clear that they never want independent-minded people in Police Oversight Authority. So what did they do? The next cohort of commissioners who were brought in were very weak people. There was a guy who, somebody who had failed as an MCA somewhere. People who could kowtow to the state. And IPOA was destroyed. Today it's a shell, of itself. So how do I trace the weaknesses that started bedeviling that institution? Is the political leadership that didn't want an independent police oversight authority because they want to control the police. And so the quality of the people who were brought in was horrible. Now, let me come to the Judicial Service Commission. We worked fairly well, but I know for a fact that in the latter days of, just as my term was coming to an end, again, the state, the quality of the people that they wanted in that commission was also quality that is, people who are weak, who will kowtow again to the state. Which is why you find that even when you come now to the issues that now are facing the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court judges, I can say with confidence that if those people are to make a mistake of appearing there, I'm telling you by now they would be already facing a tribunal, because you have people who are taking directions from the state as opposed to being independent. Now, that is a challenge that is facing a lot of so-called independent institutions in this country. And I attribute it to the manner of the quality of the people who are appointed. If you have a political leadership that has self-confidence, that believes in public interest, that wants the right things to be done, then they'll ensure that the human capital that is infused in those institutions is the right one. Chapter 6 of the Constitution is very clear. When you read all the way from Article 73 up to Article 80, it is very clear about the quality of the people who are supposed to be in these institutions. From the competence levels, from the integrity, from transparency, from people who are able to understand the work they're supposed to be doing. So the document is there, but when it comes to the implementation, when it comes to observance, you find that this constitution is respected more in breach than in a compliance with it. And it still boils down to the political leadership, because at the end of the day, the political leadership has a critical role when it comes to the appointment of the people who are managing these state organs.
But then, Macharia, the Constitution is about power, right? It's about people taking their power. It's about those who feel that they are entitled to that power, refusing to kowtow to the population. The political class will always try to subvert the Constitution, everywhere in the world. But then, when this Constitution was being written, when it was being campaigned for, people such as yourself who understood it would come and tell us, in this Constitution we have created institutions. We have moved away from personality to institutions, that in fact the office of the president is so diminished, he's just going to have to follow the institutions. Now you're telling us that just barely 15 years into this Constitution, the political class has won, that the institutions that we created to be the ones that actually ensure that the politicians do not bastardize our Constitution have failed, then the Constitution is weak.
The Constitution is not weak at all. I would say that we've made significant progress, because if you look at, say, like judiciary, for instance, by and large, they've managed to checkmate the politicians, and which is why you will see that the politicians will always be unhappy with the judiciary, which is a good thing. In fact, I would say if the politicians were happy with the judiciary, for instance, it's not something to celebrate. It means then that they're in bed together. Now, it is a continuous process. The beauty of it is that because of the rights that are enshrined within the Constitution, there are many people, and they've done very well, including the media, in terms of resisting these machinations of the politicians, because politicians will always be roguish. But of course, it also behoves on the public itself to elect the right people, because sometimes when you have rogues, for instance, now in that parliament or even in the executive, and they end up now doing all these wrong things, then we also have ourselves to blame. But now, when it comes to these independent institutions, for instance, now the commissions and even the National Police Service, the instruments of law have protected these people, which is why I'm saying that for us in IPOA, in as much as they tried to remove us, we resisted because we knew we had the law on our side. So if you don't have people who have the capacity to be able to stand firm, knowing that they have the Constitution and other, statutory provisions of the law that protect them, then the problem is those people, because you have that protection, but you choose to kowtow because you are fearing. I've never understood why anybody would want to fear. Why would you even fear the president? Because he is not the country. I mean, he's just an individual like any other. And people come and go. Why would you sit back and say that a president is this, big personality whom you can kowtow? It's a human being. There's no difference between you and the president. Why would you even fear a minister or even an inspector general? So you have to develop a mechanism, a coping mechanism of first and foremost understanding that the country belongs to us. Nobody is a guest here, And this constitution is supposed to serve all of us. The taxes that we pay are meant to serve all of us. And there's no individual, really, who should be the one now that, who should determine, your life. At the end of the day, it's you, your God, and your country.
But you say that much. I think people did try to exercise their right to want to take back their country. I think we saw that on June 25th. There's been an attempt for Kenyans to say, you cannot do this to us anymore. There's been that. And you say, there's no need to fear a president. If it's a president who rules with fear and intimidation, it's one of those delicate things. But I then wonder about IPOA and the judiciary. It almost seems like it's so far gone in terms of whether or not these institutions can serve Kenyans independently, with transparency. Is all hope lost? Like, what will it even take to regain that public trust and even for the systems to work? Are we just too far gone? Should we just disband and start over?
We shouldn't do that, in my view, and we should never lose hope, because it's the moment you lose hope and we all give up and throw our hands. We are actually playing into their hands, because that's what they would want. There has to be deliberate effort from all of us to continuously resist and demand for accountability as a right. I can tell you, these people, the way I know them, they're also cowards. They may put a face, a very brave face, that, but that face that they put is just to camouflage. It's just a mask, And there's no way you can manage 50 million people as one person. It's practically impossible. What I know for a fact is that there are people also who are within the system who a lot of times are also unhappy with the same system. And at the right time and given an opportunity, they would also resist, because they know at the end of the day, they're also part of this country. So the whole idea should be to constantly be on the lookout, to hold this system to account, not to fear, and to continue, raising issues as they come, because you cannot allow few individuals treating a country as if it's their personal property. How, for instance, do you explain, like the other day I was seeing an advert in the papers of an airstrip that is supposed to be put next to somebody's property, yet you've been talking about she and Sha. People cannot have access to medicine. You have kids, this university model that is not working. People don't have even to have a meal on the table is a problem. So you have all these resources that are being collected, but they are being put to waste. Because one of the biggest challenges that also affect administration of justice, that affect even confidence that public is supposed to have on the justice system and the country at large, is when they see waste. When they can see that they have so much problems, yet there's so much resources that is being put into areas that are not of priority. When you look at, say, I was reading somewhere about the Toyota production system, and there was this guy who was called Taichi Ono, who was saying that waste in a low growth period or society is actually a crime against society. It's not just a business loss, it's a crime. When you waste so much resources that are supposed to be put into helping people where these priorities, that's a crime to us. But how do we hold these people to account? Because them, they don't care. Remember, for them, they have these big egos, they believe that they own the country literally. They believe actually we are their subjects. Yeah, the Constitution says that they are supposed to be our servants, but they believe that we are supposed to be, literally their workers.
Right.
You
Sorry
hold them to
interrupt
account.
you, Macharia. I want to pause on the resources part before we get back to what you're saying. We are, they do think we are their servants, not the other way around. But on the resources part, I think there is the Constitution, there is the human resource, the people given these positions. Then there is the money. And I think the money is a big part of it. Independent Police Oversight Authority, funding for it from the Treasury. How is it structured? Because I think a big part of it is who pays you. You cannot bite the hand that quite literally feeds you. How do we ensure that from a monetary perspective, there is independence of IPOA and of the JSC?
The independence, of course, is already there in the law. And even when it comes now to the resources, under our current constitutional dispensation are supposed to be allocated by Parliament.
Right.
So it's the same politicians. But for me, from where I sit, like for instance, when I look at IPOA, I wouldn't say that funding was really our problem. That was not really the issue. I would be misleading if I was to say that was the problem, because we were able to convince Parliament a lot of times and we allocated the resources. Now,
Convince, that's the part. You state your case.
Yes, you
right?
state your case. One thing that we are very clear, of course, is to tell them that, you see, one thing is that you have to make it clear to them that it's in your own interest for you to fund this organization, because the people you're supposed to be serving are your own constituents. So you have to be able to put up your case.
I say because then you're at the mercy of them listening to you, as opposed to saying that 0.03% of our annual budget will go to IPOA
this institution,
or to the JSC, or
Yeah, that's all good. That's all good. The way I look at it a bit differently. I'll deal with the case of judiciary differently from the one of IPOA.
Okay.
You can have the resources, but you're still not able to deliver. If the quality of the people who are manning the institution are wrong, they'll still not be able to deliver regardless of how much resources that you have. I mean, if you look at the executive, for instance, like State House, they have a lot of resources, but are they delivering? Which means that the money is not really working. You see, there's a way you can be able to have little resources, but you're able to deploy those resources to high impact areas so that the impact is able to be felt, notwithstanding the little resources.
Yeah.
So it is not necessarily that if you have a lot of resources, you'll be able to deliver. You can have resources, but you deploy them wrongly, and the impact will not be felt. The case of judiciary is a bit different, because the executive and even legislature have been very deliberate in making sure that they are underfunded. So that's a different, and I agree that we should be able to peg the resources on a percentage of the GDP, because if you don't do that, then you leave them at a very disadvantaged position. You can't explain why Parliament, with a very small number, can be allocated so much resources. Judiciary, which is a huge institution, is allocated so little. You can't explain why NIS, for instance, should be allocated over 40 billion shillings, double the budget of what the judiciary is being allocated. So that's misplaced, and we obviously know why NIS would be allocated those funds.
Yeah.
We obviously know why Parliament will allocate itself a lot of those funds. So judiciary has to be treated differently in terms of the resource, because just like we said at the beginning, the system, the game is set to in a way that the judiciary will fail. So you'll be talking about the judges and the chief justice and all that, who are the players, attacking them, but the game itself is already rigged to make them, fail. So insofar as the resources are concerned, I think that is something, and you see, unless, again, you have a political leadership that genuinely believes in having a strong, independent judiciary, they will not allow those resources to be allocated, because of the judiciary fund, for instance, under the Constitution, it has been said, but they've made sure that the resources are not in that judiciary fund.
It doesn't get there.
It doesn't get there.
Let's take a break, Wakili. We come back and continue this conversation. Wakili Macharia Njeru is a former vice chairperson of the Judicial Service Commission and also the founding chairman of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. We are asking about trusts in these systems, especially the judicial system. Wakili Macharia represented the Law Society of Kenya in the JSC. He came in to replace Amenasir Abdullahi, who had served there before, also elected by the JSC. And now Amenasir Abdullahi is saying there is juris pesa in the judiciary. When you come back, I want to ask you, Are those allegations merited? Yes or no? Let's take a break. We'll come back shortly with Macharia Njeru. Our guest, Macharia Njeru, is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. He's somebody who says he champions good governance in all areas, and that's why he sought, for example, to be elected by lawyers to represent them in the Judicial Service Commission. Yeah, I made a mistake. He replaced Professor Tom Ojienda, who had replaced Senior Counsel Menasir Abdullahi. So, you have served in the Judicial Service Commission. You have participated in the recruitment of judges and magistrates, in the matters of, disciplining and even looking at allegations that have been brought before the JSC concerning judges and magistrates. Is there juris pesa in the judiciary?
Well, this term juris pesa, I believe it talks about, it's mainly about, corruption.
Yes.
And it would be foolhardy for anyone to say that there's no corruption in the judiciary, just as it is in other institutions in the country. In fact, I dare say that our environment is created in a way that it makes people even who ordinarily would not be corrupt, corrupt. Because see, if you look at many of us, sometimes you'll be caught in having jumped the traffic lights, or you'll not even have committed an offense. Then a traffic police officer comes and you're in a hurry to go, and they set you up to give them, something small. You go to push a document in Land's office or any other place, maybe an ID, and you're in a hurry. You are due to travel. You're in immigration, you need a passport. So our system sometimes is set in a way that the environment sometimes will make people who would narrowly not be corrupt. That is not to justify it, because again, judiciary, and when it comes to justice, people have to be held to higher standard. So I can't say that those cases are not there. We dealt with some of them when I was there. We actually sent home some magistrates. We sent home even judges. That happened. It's in public domain, so it has happened. So it is not like action has not been taken. It is not like there shouldn't be continuous action and putting in systems and mechanism of dealing with it. It is there. But how we deal with it, we shouldn't deal with it in a manner that shows clearly that there's a bigger agenda, especially when it comes to the judiciary. Because clearly when you look at the institution of the so-called juris pesa, if you look at what is happening even with the petitions, again with the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court judges, you can see that the agenda is not about juris pesa, because you can't be prosecuting your case in social media day in, day out, making all manner of allegations and not supporting it with hard evidence. Because see, everybody is entitled to at least, a fair hearing. Everybody is entitled to an opportunity to defend them. You can't be bashing somebody in social media all the time, particularly when you're talking about an institution that is as sensitive as the judiciary, because there's a way you can also bash the institution and the people who are manning it to a point whereby people have zero confidence in it, and that's a recipe for chaos. You have to also ensure that you are following also a structured process, obviously making sure that there's accountability, because we must hold them to accountable. There's no dispute about it. We must hold the people who are manning these institutions, accountable. But not making a blanket condemnation or bringing frivolous proceedings against them because you are holding fort for somebody else.
But then you're imputing improper motive here. There is actual petitions. There are petitions that have been lodged against these judges and even judges of the High Court. There are petitions before the JSC. And that's why this matter is now going to back and forth in court, because there are petitions and the JSC is actually being expected to move on these petitions. So they're not frivolous. Well, they could be frivolous, but it's upon the JSC to actually look at them and come and say, this one does not hold water because of this and the other. We can't judge and say, but this one is frivolous.
True. I agree with you, Eric, that you can't judge something is frivolous without giving it, an opportunity of being verified and all that. Now, you see, the difference here is that I have had the advantage of sitting in the same commission. I know the standards that are applied in determining a petition, the veracity of it, when you ask a judge to respond to it. It's not everything that you ask a judge to respond to. I actually used to I was chairing the committee that was vetting the petitions before they could go to the next stage of being admitted for hearing, and even asking judges to respond. And I used to chair the panel that were hearing the complaints against judges and magistrates. And we sent judges home, we sent magistrates home. So I know the standards. So on the face of it, when I look at a petition, I can tell which one can pass the muster, which one cannot. So I'll not just speak generally, I'll be able to understand. But more importantly, when you are prosecuting a complaint against a judge and a magistrate, you don't prosecute it in public domain. You see, now that's where the difference comes in. Because you're already condemning these people every single day, 5 times a day, you are prosecuting your case as the petitioner, stating that these are the facts, this is what the position, these are people corrupt, who are these. You see, already you've started on a wrong footing, because if you're doing it in good faith, what you do, you present your petition to the commission. Then you will expect it now to be processed in the normal manner. And if indeed now it is not, you find that this impediment on the part of the JSC, then you can be able to say validly that JSC is not doing its job. But here is a case whereby you're focusing on laying bare all your allegations in public domain without giving now these people an opportunity. That's now where I am saying that you start questioning the good faith, on the part of it. And what I also know for a fact, and I do not wish to get into the merits of the petition because the matters have also gone to court anyway, is that there was standard that we already set, not necessarily captured in a complaints manual. There's already been a failure by JSC Commission to set up that complaints, manual. But, one thing for sure is that we never used to ask judges to respond, to justify their decision, because JSC cannot sit as an appeal court on decisions made by judges. Right. Otherwise, if you open that, then it would then mean that where do end? You take away the independence. You take away the independence, because you start now telling judges to appear before you, and they start justifying their decisions, especially when it's a college decision. That's also a recipe for chaos. But as to the merits of it, I already see a problem in terms of those petitions.
From a public confidence perspective, what does that do for our faith in the judiciary, for the person who's watching and seeing if the Supreme Court can be taken to, the JSC, or if someone can lodge petitions against the 7 judges, all 7 of them sitting there, then why should I go and prosecute my case in small claims court? Why should I then, uphold the law court in court? I think there's a lot of questions that, are bound from that, from a public confidence perspective. Do you think that's...
But I agree with you, Mariam. You see, Judicial Service Commission has a lot of work. I know that for a fact, that there are so many other petitions pending before them. There are so many complaints against magistrates, which they are not processing. I'm speaking from a point of authority. That I recall by the time when I left JSC, that was in May last year, there was no backlog. But I see now a lot of complaints from lawyers that they've submitted their petitions, they have complaints, and they are not dealing with them, So what they should be doing is focusing on them, not focusing on sideshows. Because to me, this issue of the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court judge is a sideshow. It's a sideshow. It's not that there are no complaints or petitions against other, and where there's actual, petitions that have a basis, that have a sound basis, where they should be able to be sitting down, processing them, and taking action, appropriate action. But here you come jumping on these ones, for other considerations. That's why I'm saying that is now where you find the public lacking confidence, because they'll ask themselves, you've come here, you are focusing on these ones, yet I filed my complaint or petition now almost a year ago. You're not attending to it, and you are now attending to these ones. So you see, it is upon the institution themselves to ensure that they act in a manner that infuses confidence, because confidence is earned. You can't demand for it. And you can't, you can't be using lofty words saying that we are an independent institution, we believe in a fair administration of justice, we believe on all this. It's all good to say that as words, but do your actions match the words that you are stating? Your work should be able to show that indeed you're independent and you're doing the right thing. So confidence will be earned as a result of the product or the work that arises from the institutions themselves. Because, like for instance, the JSC, if I was to speak about it, we have a strategic plan that we developed, and one of the strategic objectives was to make sure that we gain public confidence both in the institution of the judiciary and also the JSC itself. But how will you gain that public confidence if you don't do your work correctly? And we must also remember, as you are saying about how people appear before the same judges if they're being taken to court, they also have their own rights, because you cannot wait as a judge. You know that you're not going to go through a fair process here. You know for sure, because I know for a fact.
The JSC.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. You know that you're going where you're actually being set. You know, you are being set in a way that your head is being chopped.
Not into a shark den.
Yes, that you know that when the moment you are there, you are being sent not because of anything wrong that you've done, but because you've been set to appear there and action is being taken. Because if you look at, if you observe the social media posts that are going there, you could see it's like there's even information that is coming from JSC itself that's indicating of what are the next actions that are going to be taken. So how do these people know that they are posting the social media if they are not communicating with people within the same commission? So even I, as that Supreme Court judge or the Chief Justice, I would go to court because I also have my own rights. It is not like I don't have also a constitution that protects me from taking appropriate action. That does not mean that we should allow rogue judges or rogue magistrates to have their way. It doesn't mean that, which is why I'm saying that there are pending petitions that are genuine, I believe, against judges and also other magistrates. Focus on them. Take appropriate action, of course, observing due process, but don't engage in side shows.
You know, I'm sitting here, Macharia, just trying to think, when it comes to IPOA, I don't think I don't know if there's been any officer who's been held accountable either for negligence or anything. I think about the number of femicide cases. I think about the people who want to report to the police about gender-based violence and don't get any assistance. Then I think about what Mariam just asked about the judiciary. Trying to remain optimistic, but I'm also trying to find a fix. By the way, you should be asking, what's the fix here? Right? I don't know, what can people take home from this conversation in as far as I'm sitting, I'm listening, and I'm watching. I have a case, I want to take it to the courts, or I have a report that I want to file, but I don't have trust. I have fear, I feel intimidated, I feel helpless, and I feel lost. I want us to take it from that position. By the time people have finished listening to this conversation, what can they take from it in terms of how they can move forward within their rights while also holding these platforms accountable for the injustices that they continue to perpetuate, I think.
You know, starting with the IPOA, there were actually very many police officers that we took to court and they were charged and convicted. In fact, there was even one who was sentenced to death. So no CS was sentenced to death. There were police officers sentenced to 15 years, 10 years. There was, I remember, a JSC officer that who had raped a woman and even infected her with AIDS. We investigated. The guy was charged, I believe. I left the case ongoing. I believe he was convicted. So things were happening. Now, the problem is when now all the things are happening, then now there's a cut-off point, so to speak, and then a new team comes, then they disrupt. Because, like, for instance, like when it comes to IPOA, I know for a fact, because, some of these officers that we recruited are still there. Sometimes they'll complain to me. Like these cases of abduction, they say that they knew that they would be able to pursue even the, the offending police officer, but they are stopped. The people who are within the higher ones within the institution and also even the state, they are stopped. Even when Gen Zs, went and raided, when they went to Parliament, they started investigating and they were pursuing, but again, they are stopped. These are junior officers. If you are stopped at the higher level, what are you able to do, So you find that many of them will opt to start now resigning and going to other institutions because they feel hurt, because they know that they have the capacity and the ability to pursue some of these matters, but the impediment is, placed right in front of them. And when it comes even now to the judiciary, there's a lot of good that is also happening, There's, yes, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we'll always say. Because you find that even in terms of, holding the executive to account, the judiciary, by and large, has also done fairly well. There's, of course, the side that the public is unhappy, and they have a lot of room also to improve. We agree, in regard to that. But this is a systemic problem that, as I said, that I would still tie back to the political governance, because it is so tiring sometimes when you have a system that is supposed to ensure that things are working, but they are actively making sure that they are disorganizing things to make sure that they don't work. And for me, this constant, agitation and, activism on the part of the public, the media, the civil society, and all of us, and even the ones who are good also within the institution, is very critical. Because if we give up again, therein lies the problem. But also, the public has to elect correctly, because we can't be in a situation whereby we are constantly saying that, we are electing this one so that we can punish this one, as opposed to looking at quality leadership that can be able to perform for the good of the country. Because I keep saying, every time that you waste a cycle of 5 years, 5 years is a long time. Because within 5 years, somebody will have died because they didn't have access to medicine. You can't revive them because you're going to elect another person in a 5 years' time. When you have young people who cannot get jobs because the system is so destroyed that the economy is not performing at all, they can't get jobs. Only those ones who have access, to high powers can be able to get those jobs. You're destroying their future. For a young person, like every time I look at the young people and I compare with myself when I was at their age, when I had all these opportunities that were available, now they can't even have those opportunities. That's why you find a lot of them even have mental health issues, because they simply can't survive. But why? Because we have a system that is just not working for them. So
stolen futures,
so to speak. So it is also upon now the public and all of us, because you're all part of the public, to ensure that when it comes now to the elections, that we, for the first time, because we've been doing it very badly, all of us are guilty of doing it wrongly. Let us not have this situation whereby we are choosing between, two evils. Which one is the lesser evil? Why don't we just ensure that we have the right people, so that for the first time we can say now we can start that new beginning, a new journey where we can reclaim our, our country.
I like that.
Listening to you, Macharia, I'm hearing some alarm bells just ringing in my head. Because basically this is somebody who has served in 2 commissions, and he's here saying, as they stand today, these 2 commissions have been captured by politicians. The Judicial Service Commission has been captured. I hear you say that. The Independent Policing Oversight Authority has been captured. And you know these 2 because you've served there before. Now you say they are captured. Is that, did I get you wrong?
Yes. No, you didn't get it wrong. You got it right. You're a sharp guy. So, and it's not just those institutions. Let me be clear. If you look at most of the institutions that are supposed to be independent, actually they've been captured. Because I dare say that the institution that worked quite well were the ones that came immediately after the Constitution. And now what the politicians now decided to do, when they saw that those institutions were strong, they were doing their work, they were being heard and all that, now they were very deliberate in making sure that the new people who are coming now after the expiry of the terms of the commissioners and the other independent offices were people who were compliant to the state. That's why you'll find that most of these institutions were filled by failed politicians, people who had failed, for instance, in a
cronyism and just reward system.
People who, when you look at them, you wonder, surely, when you compare that with the expectations of Chapter 6 of the Constitution, and that's where now the public loses confidence instantly.
How do we fix it?
It still boils down to the political leadership. If you have a wrong political leadership, don't expect, in fact, the tone is set from the top. In any corporate entity, and a government is no different from a corporate entity, the tone is set from the top. Even here in nation media, if you have a wrong top, things will not work. And you see, it is all about a culture that is set in an institution. The culture is normally determined by and large by the people who are manning the institution. So the culture that we have now in our country is one of a political leadership that wants to control, to micromanage, that wants, it's either their way or the highway. So the people that they'll pick are the people who can be able to answer to them, to their whims and caprices, not people who will answer to the demands and aspirations and expectations of the public. So they want people who will serve them as opposed to will serve the public. So therein lies the problem, in my view. If we don't sort that out, we'll always have a problem.
To fix it or to fix.
I was going to ask him, we are where we are right now. In the meantime, because we are a few years from another election, what can we do in the meantime?
The public has to be constantly on the lookout. They have to know that this is their country, that whatever goes wrong, it affects them directly. So they have to hold the institutions, including the government, to account as a matter of right. Because, as I said, it is not a favor. Okay. You know, when you are demanding for services, it is not a favor. You are demanding actually for a right that, you know, belongs to you as a Kenyan, as a taxpayer. And as we said, you're not a guest in the country. So all of us jointly have to continue making sure that we hold the institutions to account so that they can deliver.
That's how we fix it. And that's why we said we are fixing it one conversation at a time, fixing it together, working towards it together. Our next conversation is going to be just that, accountability, and seeking accountability on the issue of 15 billion trees program to be planted over 10 years. Where are we? What does that mean? How much will it cost us in terms of money, in terms of time? What are the benefits that, if any, we can get? Plus many other conversations that we'll have with Eden Duale, who is the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. He's here. He's next. It's 8 a.m. Keep it here for that.